Assalamu alaikum everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Mind Deen podcast. So in our previous episode, we introduced the importance of having a routine in our daily lives and the impact that it has on alleviating our mood, helping us regulate our emotions and making the most of our days. So today I'm going to be exploring a bit more about how we use different routines or activity scheduling as part of our recommended intervention for low mood and depression. A quick disclosure before I begin. Since I'll be talking about certain topics that might be sensitive for some people, or if what I cover is something that you're experiencing at the moment, then please feel free to end the episode and get support from friends, family, or other local support systems. So sometimes we all struggle with feeling a bit low or feeling sad. But when these feelings start to affect your ability to do day-to-day tasks, then this is when it might be considered to be low mood. So when you feel this way, it's normal to experience fatigue or difficulty sleeping. You may also feel frustrated and it can affect your confidence or self-esteem. Now, when you find that these feelings are impacting other areas of your life, then it's a good idea to start thinking about getting help at this point. According to the diagnostic manual, if you have low mood or if you're experiencing low mood for 2 weeks or more, it could be a sign of depression. Other symptoms of depression may include anhedonia, so lack of enjoyment in life, hopelessness, having thoughts of ending life or suicide or self-harm, either sleeping too much or having very little sleep at all, or not being able to concentrate on everyday things. Now, depression is acknowledged in Islam. So the Prophet ﷺ was said to experience a whole year of sadness after he lost his wife Khadija radiallahu anhu and his uncle in the same year. The Prophet also went through many hardships and a great deal of trauma throughout his life. And the Prophet ﷺ, being extremely loved by Allah, he did experience a lot of hardship, as did many of the other prophets. And during these times, the Prophet normalized crying. He acknowledged crying as a feeling and that it's a blessing from Allah to feel and it does not make you weak. And this is important to note because there is a lot of stigma attached to men having feelings or men crying in our society. And this is not what Islam teaches us. And it's very important to feel or experience these emotions to process the different situations that happen through our lifetime. So when someone experiences a difficult situation, they tend to have negative thoughts about that situation. Why did this happen to me? Why is it always me? Why not someone else? What might other people be thinking, right? Am I silly? Am I stupid? These thoughts have a direct impact on how you feel. So you might feel sad, you might feel frustrated, you might feel hopeless. And these feelings have an impact on your behavior. What happens is more often than not, our behavior is to avoid. Our behavior is to become inactive, to stay in bed, to avoid self-care, not get work done, to not get up and go to school. And in the short term, we might think that this is helpful. We might think that this gives us the opportunity to take a break and feel better. What happens is that this is in fact a very unhelpful way of dealing with the situation, and in the long run, makes us get stuck in this cycle. We as practitioners refer to as the vicious cycle of low mood. The most important thing to learn from this is that thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are all interconnected. What we think impacts what we feel impacts what we do, how we behave, and how we behave has an impact on the other two. And the Prophet ﷺ actually, he said that when he was grieving or when he was in distress, both his psychological and physiological health were really affected at this point. Now, for people who are experiencing low mood, the most common behavior to engage in is avoidance. So like I said earlier, avoiding our day-to-day routine, avoiding self-care, avoiding going to work, going to school the next day. Another thing that a lot of people do when they experience low mood or depression is called rumination. Rumination involves repetitive thinking or dwelling on negative experiences and feelings. The habitual behavior, which can act as a form of avoidance. So you're thinking about the difficulties again and again rather than engaging in activities that can help you break out of that cycle. An interesting fact is that the name rumination actually comes from the act of cows regurgitating their food. So, chew their food again and again, they bring it up again and again. That's exactly what we do with our thoughts. So, we bring up those negative thoughts again and again, ask ourselves the same questions, and all it does is it just maintains that cycle. It doesn't help us get any better or feel any better. So, the easiest way to break out of this cycle is to focus on our behaviors, to change our behaviors, because the easiest thing we can control is our behavior. Which brings us to behavioral activation as an intervention. So, the aim of behavioral activation, or BA for short, is to reduce avoidance and increase opportunities for positive reinforcement. The tool to help us break out of the thoughts, behavior, feeling cycle. So, by gradually increasing our activity levels, even though we may not feel it at the moment, it helps us in the long run. Because waiting for motivation to come around will take a long time, because feelings don't change by themselves, right? We never wait to feel better to do something. We always do something and then we feel better. BA is about making your life meaningful again. And of course, it takes time to have an impact, like everything does. And you have to keep practicing it to see a change. So sometimes when we try out a new activity, when we're feeling a bit low, it might have an impact at that time. And then when you try it again, it might not have the same impact, which is called initial temporary relief. But if you practice it over time, the initial temporary relief becomes more permanent and you see a permanent change in your thoughts, in your feelings, and your behaviors. An interesting fact and a therapy hack, if you may, is that BA, or behavioral activation, is really one part of a wider intervention called the cognitive behavioral therapy. However, research shows that just engaging in behavioral activation is as effective as doing the whole 6 to 8 weeks of the whole CBT intervention. So, this is a hack for anyone going through CBT or thinking about getting therapy. Ask your therapist to help you focus on behavioral activation. So there are examples in our religion on how we can engage in behaviors that help our mental health during times of distress. The Prophet ﷺ taught us about holistic self-care. So eating well, sleeping well, these behaviors contribute to our psychological well-being. There are also examples of physical remedies used to treat emotional distress. So there was a special soup that Aisha radiallahu anhu used to prepare, made out of barley, milk and honey, to treat those experiencing anxiety, depression, and even bereavement-induced psychosis, which is recommended by the Prophet. Now, these are all ideas of behaviors that we can engage in that help us feel a bit better and reinforce the idea that our thoughts, behaviors, and feelings are all interconnected. Another example is that we can reduce our anxiety and low mood by engaging in prayer and dhikr, of course. So your morning and evening adhkar, fitting that into your schedule is a good idea. Behavioral activation. The Prophet also said that when you're angry and you are standing, sit down. If you're sitting down, then lie down. And this is an example of changing your behavior to change your feelings in the moment. Whatever you're going through, if you try and stay steadfast in your belief and continue making dua and engaging in activities that you value and Allah values, it helps break that cycle. And personally, this has really helped me when I was going through a difficult time. I did try to continue making dua, continue praying, and continue doing activities that I value doing. So going out to see friends, painting, talking to family, all of these helped me in the long run, even if I didn't feel like doing it in the moment. So practicing behavioral activation in our sessions, what we do is we understand the relationship between our activities and our mood. We recognize rumination and identify what matters to us, our values, our interests, and then we schedule meaningful activities throughout our days. So, there are 3 steps on how we practice behavioral activation in our sessions. The first step is to establish a link between activity and mood by examining what the young person or what the person's life looks like at the moment. So, what we do is we go through our current activity schedule, so what we do currently in our day to day lives, and we rate each activity on the amount of achievement felt, the connection, and enjoyment. The idea is that we want to increase the activities where we feel a high level of achievement, connection, and enjoyment. And what we actually find by doing this is that a lot of clients realize that they have times throughout the day where they're doing nothing, or there are times where they're just lying in bed. And what this does is it gives them the time and opportunity to ruminate or have those negative thoughts. What we want to do is try and change that and fit in activities during that time that we value. So, step 2 is to identify the person's values and interests. So, we go through a checklist of possible values, possible interests, which might help the person to think about different values or interests they might have, and then we plan out different activities which match these interests and values, add it to the schedule, and step 3 is reviewing how these planned activities went and repeating them. So, by doing BA, you get a sense of control over your life when there are so many things out of control, and it's rewarding to have a schedule or structure when you follow through with the plan at the end. And of course, has an impact on how you feel at the end of it if you keep practicing. So, in summary, the concept of behavioral activation in itself is proposed to increase activity in your daily routine. And what activity does is increases the behaviors that you do, which then impacts your thoughts and your feelings. So, the TBF cycle. And biologically, keeping active releases endorphins, which are known as happy hormones. And if you look at behavioral activation as a form of self-care rather than a burden, it's easier to implement. And there are so many opportunities for us as Muslims to implement different value-based activities that can help us feel much better. And practicing that on a daily basis, filling our schedules with value-based activities really helps us change those negative thoughts, those negative automatic thoughts that we might be feeling. So that's all for today. So thanks for tuning in and see you in the next episode.